stolen items, and it seems like they've had a downturn in that, and so these people are basically going to different pawn shops in other areas versus going over to the Round Lake pawn shops and secondhand shops. So it's kind of interesting how they had that developed. Also had a meeting last week with Chief Perlini of Grays Lake, and to discuss, to go over topics of what we might be able to bring to our residents as far as what the mayor and I actually sat down today also and talked about it. And we were thinking that coming in April that we're going to put a presentation or on identity theft. So more information for our residents and how they can protect themselves. So this is what we're thinking of doing, and nothing's been filed, so I have to get back with the police chief on that and see what happens. And I'll keep you guys updated later on. And one thing that did come out of that, also out of that meeting with Police Chief Perlini, was the fact that we had last month, I think we had some thieves going around the neighborhoods again, and there was 3 break-ins into cars. Okay, which he keeps on mentioning that this is kind of common occurrences, and most of the times the cars are left unlocked, and that's where they're getting in, taking items and everything else. So he just wants the residents to be sure to, to give a word out that keep your car doors locked in your driveway and keep your garages closed, because all they want to do is they want to get something so they can take it and pawn it or whatever. So basically, that's most of the things that we're seeing right now is the fact that they had another instance where these thieves went through the neighborhood and found some open car doors and grabbed whatever it was. I think it was a laptop and something else. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to wetlands and open spaces. Trustee Huberstein.
Everything that I have under my jurisdiction is under snow. So there isn't anything going on at this time.
Quick
It's
question
a historical moment.
Quick question on the payables. We had a pretty good sized bill going out to need of restoration. Was that for work that was done earlier this year? Or
Yes.
is tardy billing us, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of, we coordinated things that had been done and to do, and we finally got these bills all put together.
Okay. All right, next up is community relations. Trustee Darrenowski.
Well, we had a meeting at the last board meeting that was discussed basically maybe putting off Hainesville Fest this year with a pretty much certainty that we're not going to have a Hainesville Fest this year in favor of doing a much smaller, more scaled down event that doesn't require so much work of the staff and everybody else involved, just because it's a lot, it's very time consuming, and it's a lot of work that gets put into it, and it's very, very costly. So we were thinking of doing a much more smaller scale event this year, and with the possibility of doing a much larger Hainesville Fest next year, which is something that we had kicked around for a couple of years previous, but we decided to go ahead with the Hainesville Fest the past couple of years, and this year we are going to go ahead and move forward with a smaller scale event this year. That's pretty much it.
Well, that's quite a mouthful. And yes, we discussed that. There's also looking at adding a co-chair to the committee, Jackie Bruck. And I don't believe you two have made contact yet?
No.
No. So there has not been an official meeting yet. So I would say there's going to be some additional discussion at that meeting before we decide exactly where this is going. But we're looking at putting a halt for 1 year on a full-blown Hainesville Fest, substituting a smaller scale event, and then coming back the following year with a full weekend event. So rather than the 1 day, having it a Saturday and a Sunday event. But there's a lot of ideas on the table, and so I think we'll have a much more accurate report at the next board meeting. Okay, we'll move on to business. First item up is a request for a rental waiver at 556 North Triumph. We've had several of these in the past, and rather than putting this one on the omnibus agenda, I did have the clerk place it under business because this isn't quite a rubber stamp one as the other ones have been. There were some concerns, and in fact, I talked with Attorney Jim Rock, particularly after I talked with the clerk, and we got feedback from the Townhome Association. There's a question of whether it truly meets all the hardship requirements and whether the voucher on the real estate timeline is too old. So Jim, do you want to add to that?
Sure, thank you. This one does present some interesting questions. I think that the owners of the property have, in the letter that they sent, articulated their position very clearly. I think they've made some good, strong points. There are a couple of problem areas here. One is, if on the front page you see the note from the Condominium Association President, Don Hayden, and he suggests that the hardship is that they had to move back to DC in 2007. And because of the poor market, cannot sell the property without taking heavy losses. While that sounds like a hardship, it's not the hardship that's defined in the Condominium Association covenants. It has a very specific definition in the covenants, and that is essentially that they have to list the property for sale unsuccessfully for 6 months. And then they can request a hardship, and then the board decides. So if you look at the back of the packet, it was listed for sale for 6 months, 5.5 years ago. It was actually, based on the documents we have, it was on the market for about a year, and starting 5.5 years ago and ending 4.5 years ago. So there have been no current efforts to market the property. But then to sort of complicate the matter even a little more, as you can read from the letter that they sent to us, they had been renting this until July of this year. And apparently they've done some renovation of the unit since then, so they haven't rented it between July and February. And now, if they request to rent it, it goes into this, we're above the 15% mark, and they have to request a hardship. I think they make some reasonable points about, leaving the unit vacant for another 6-month period. But if we're going to stick with the hardship definition that is in the covenants, this effort to sell it happened too long ago. It's not a current effort to market the property. And as an aside, lawyers don't like to rely on other lawyers' opinions, especially if they represent the other party. But in this case, the Condominium Association president did tell the village clerk that their attorney, the Condominium Association's attorney, advised them that those marketing efforts were too long in the past, and that they shouldn't approve it and then send it to the village board, that they should require the homeowner to reestablish the hardship by marketing the property for 6 months. So, quite frankly, I concur with that. The problem we have is the age of their marketing efforts. It's been 4.5 years since they even tried to sell the property.
The concern I have, and why I brought this to Jim, is we're going to be setting a precedent again, because there could very well be, we know by the time that Cranberry Lake North came to us with this problem, they were well in excess of the 15%. So the odds of another rental popping up that for whatever reason now has to go through the hardship process, are they going to rely on that they had their townhouse on the market 4 or 5 years ago, and that's what we're supposed to accept, because that's not the way the ones have been thus far. So the question is, do we just say you need to start over? You need to try to sell the townhouse and it's on the market 6 months and you can't sell it, then you can apply for the hardship.
Have we looked into, have any sales taken place recently in that community?
Have we looked into?
I mean,
No. No,
Don
we-
Hyden didn't say whether anything is selling, or is there a way we could check? I mean, if nothing has been selling, then...
Well, we can tell them to check. No, they're not spending a lot of time checking on this. When Don approached me about this, the initial contact was, this was a hardship case, would we consider the process? And I told him that if it went through the process with their board, and their board approved it, they should forward it to us.
Their board hasn't approved it.
Well, their board has approved it, but at that meeting, their attorney cautioned them that they should,
Well,
okay?
didn't they just push it off to us? So they
They're,
don't-
yes. So what
So-
they're doing is they're pushing it off to us.
And
And
that's what I was
my
saying.
caution is that I don't think we want to be the ones setting the precedent. I think their board has work to do. I think that's a good question, Georgianne, but this board and staff is not going to spend the time and money looking into that. I think they should.
But perhaps if we could go back to them and say that if they could get some kind of a marketing report from a realtor that indicates how many units have sold in the last 6 months or a year, whatever time frame they want, then perhaps we could have some rationale for saying, look, if nothing has sold, there, even if we let them do this for 6 months.
Well, there are
it's
units
stuck.
selling. I mean, some of them are selling at sheriff's sales, though.
The trouble,
Yeah.
I'm going to say, we sell units, but the trouble is they're getting between 60 and 80, maybe 85,000. They're way under market. I just
Well,
did one
especially
yesterday.
you're quoting prices from the sheriff's sales.
Well, no, I'm holding a price that I just did Monday. I just did another one in Holiday Lane, and the guy said it paid $70,000 for it.
Really?
Yeah.
And that wasn't a distress sale?
Dude, this place was gorgeous.
Really?
Yeah, bought it from the bank for 70 grand.
Well, but I mean, it was
But it bought it
a
from the bank.
foreclosure.
But it bought it from the bank.
Right, exactly. They're all foreclosed, right.
Yeah,
But
they're
most
all
of these things are
foreclosed.
foreclosed units sitting there.
Yeah, I mean, so there aren't any real sales. I mean,
Well, I don't think it should make any difference whether somebody's selling them or not.
Right.
The problem is with this couple, and they need to go through their process to get it through. I would be in favor of the board doing anything right now until they've gone through the process. The association apparently already told them no.
Well, no, the board did not tell them no. The board kicked it up to us. The board rubber stamped it. The attorney recommended they did. They said, well, that's our attorney's opinion, but we'll kick it up to the village and see what we say.
So essentially, they're breaking their own covenants by sending it up to us in the first place.
Basically, yes.
Yeah, passing it to us.
Yeah.
That's what we usually do.
Of course you have to do something.
I spoke to Don Hyden the other day. He called with concerns, and he also said, I have my notes here, that Vanguard even is having concerns about this. As you said,
The management
the
company.
management company, because of opening up a can of worms about the length of
Procedures.
time. Yeah.
Well, then I think if the board instructs me, I would like to go back to Don Hyden and tell him he needs to work with Vanguard and their attorney
I agree.
and go back and talk to their client.
yeah, then it's really, then we're not the bad guys on this.
You know.
Apparently,
Well, it's not
so-
a good idea.
It's not our jurisdiction, really.
It's not our jurisdiction, and we have repeatedly told them ways they can change this.
And they have never done that.
You know,
Well, that and the owner hasn't followed the process properly, so, I mean, let's ask them at least to go through the process, and that way, if we have to grant a hardship, they've gone through the process, and nobody can point a finger at us saying that we didn't do our diligence and we're rubber stamping them either.
right.
Apparently, the hardship didn't include the improvements they put into it in the last 6 months.
Yeah, right.